Hello lovely people, this week I'm doing a first for my channel, and that is a series reread review.
Sophie Vlogs.
In 2018 I set myself the goal to reread more books. I used to reread books all the time, I love it. And in recent years I've just done less of that. I think it's just because my to-read pile is so tall that I always look at it and I'm like, how can I justify reading something I've already read when look how many there are? Which sort of, ignores the fact that reading is for pleasure. So the teaser trailer for Mortal Engines recently came out, which made me very excited and also mildly miffed, but we'll get to that in a minute. So this is a long rambly way of saying that I have recently been rereading the Mortal Engines Quartet, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on them now. 2 points. Number one, this will be full of spoilers. It's a whole series review. If you've not read the series and you don't want any spoilers, then don't watch this video. Come back, read it, then come back, then chat to me about your thoughts. That would be great. My second point is, a point on the teaser trailer of the film is, where the fuck is Hester's scar? That was like, I got really, really excited, and then I got really, really annoyed because I was like, her face, unblemished. So like, we'll put a pin in that and wait till the film comes out and see what's going on there, but not a great start, Philip, not a great start. I first started reading this series about 2003, 2004. I think only the first book was out at that point, and then the rest of them I had to wait for them to come out. Maybe the first two were out. They're both paperback, so I don't really know anymore. I loved them at the time. I have reread them a number of times across my life, but I haven't reread them for a number of years. So it has been very interesting rereading them after a break, and having had the Fever Crumb books come out. Well, the Fever Crumb books are sort of prequels to this. They're set before all of this happens. They set up a lot of like the Traction City stuff, that sort of thing. If you haven't read them, they are super great. I would really recommend them. I will be moving on to them next, and there will be a Fever Crumb, probably a series review to come as well. So essentially, this is a long rambly way of saying that I was really, really excited to reread these. It has been interesting because some of the books I have loved as much as I did when I first read them, and some of the books I haven't disliked them, but I've noticed more things that I haven't loved. So, I will do a quick whiz through, if you will. Mortal Engines, I personally still absolutely thoroughly enjoyed. I thought it had, I still think the plot is really interesting. I still find, I find Hester and Tom balance each other quite well in this. I think, Dylan's great. I connected much more with the Catherine subplot in this than I think I did on my first time round. I think my first time round I was so overexcited about Hester and Tom and all their adventures that the Catherine plot was a bit like, Whereas now when I read this, I really, really still loved that. And her and Bevis. Oh, babes. Predator's Gold, I still really liked, but So initially when I started reading these, I had them all set as 5 stars on Goodreads, because when I updated all my Goodreads with all the books I'd read previously, I was just like, 5 stars, everything, it's amazing. I downgraded this one to a 4-star because I really liked it, but there were, I didn't love it as much as I love Mortal Engines. And then when we get to Infernal Devices, I actually downgraded this one to a 3-star, maybe a 3.5, because I found this the weakest book of the trilogy of the quartet to me, insofar as I found this a strange adjustment, because the first 2 books you get so invested in Hester and Tom and their journey and what they're going through, that to then do this jump forward in time was a little jarring, despite the fact that I have already read this and knew what was coming. I also found I didn't really love where Hester's at in this book. I didn't entirely buy that that's where she would emotionally be. I don't know, I never had any problem with it when I read it previously. I always took the view that, like, I really liked that Hester was allowed to be flawed and not always nice and that sort of thing, and I still do really like that. I guess I don't know, something didn't sit right with me this time. And I also found Tom more annoying than I had previously, because I realised when he was younger, he's very foolhardy, yes, but he seemed a little bit more competent, whereas in this one he felt much less competent, which I found kind of annoying. It also took me a little while to warm up to Ren again, despite the fact that on the whole I quite like Ren. I think because initially she has a lot more of her father in her, and because Tom was kind of annoying me, I think there was a little bit where I was like, oh come on Ren, one of you has to be competent. Hester can't carry you all. And, yes. So I struggled a little bit more with this one, and then we came back onto A Darkling Plain, and this is the longest book of the trilogy, and I keep calling it a trilogy, I'm so sorry. I personally appreciated the length because I felt like this book had a lot of setting up, whereas this book had a lot of delivering on what has previously been set up, and characters who you might have initially forgot the relevance of, or at least I forgot the relevance of at points, you're suddenly aware again, like it brings everyone back together again. And I personally really, really enjoyed this one still. That's sort of like a blitz thought on like the reading experience for me. I want to just talk about a couple of characters now. So I have some favourite characters which have not changed. So I really like Shrike. I find Shrike so interesting. I find the journey that Shrike goes on from when you first meet him to when you last meet him so interesting, and especially having read the Fever Crumb books, which then you get Shrike's backstory, I found reading this again, like he probably hadn't planned, probably didn't know what Shrike's backstory was when he wrote these books, but with that knowledge, and then the journey that Shrike goes on, I still find him a really interesting character, and I really liked when he was in the text again. I also really like Anna Fang. Anna Fang was always one of my favourites. I would really like an entire series that's just Anna and Satya, just their adventures as youths together, and like maybe some romance, and I think that would just be utterly fantastic. So then the journey of Anna becoming Stalker fan and all that sort of stuff was again interesting to reread now, because at times, like, she's doing all these horrible things. So I found that interesting to reread because my favourite bits is when it was Anna and the Stalker and they're sort of competing, trying to claim control, because I get really sad when the Stalker entirely takes over, because everything I love about Anna in that point is now gone. I loved her so much that I was just like, oh, why? But again, that sort of arc and struggle was something I found very interesting to read, even if I am sad that, like, Anna could have just taken over. That would have been great. I also found looking at villains interesting this time, and I think the villains might be one of the reasons why I didn't enjoy the third book so much. I know as you read these, there's like your villain person, but then there's also like the greater conflict, which has villains and heroes within it. But with just like your individual villain for each book, Valentine is a villain I really like, because he is, like, I don't know, I feel like he's such a human villain. There's, like, he's awful, but he's not wholly awful, but he is pretty fucking awful. I think his role in the first book, he's very nefarious, but also the way he sort of continues to run throughout the books, despite the fact that he's already dead, and he runs throughout the books in Hester's relationship to him, just means that I still really like him as a villain. I think he's a very effective villain. And then I feel like Mascard in the second book and Wolf in the fourth book, they are interesting enough villains that I didn't have a problem with them. Whereas with the third book, like, your main like villain person is the slaver guy, whose name I've now entirely forgotten. And I just found him less interesting. But I don't know why. I guess because he's slightly more one-dimensional. Like, slavery is very, very bad. People should not make people slaves. I didn't feel like he had much depth to him, other than the fact that we meet a guy who is in charge of enslaving people, and you go, he's a bad guy. Whereas at least with like Wolf, you can sort of see how he's been formed by the moment they're living in, how this conflict that's been dragging on has brought up kids like him and that sort of thing. I don't know. I just really struggled with the third book, and I still don't really know why. I didn't struggle, I still really liked it and enjoyed it. It just left me with more nagging things than the other ones had, I think. I also found the experience of reading Pennyroyal kind of interesting this time around, because, like, he pisses me off so much in the earlier books, and then by the time I get to the fourth book, I am a little bit like, oh, babes. Like, for some reason we've just forgiven him for everything shit he's ever done, and then we're all just like, yeah, old guy, you can come along. I don't know why. I sort of just want to end by mulling over some thoughts about Hester, because I still really love Hester, because I really love heroines who are allowed to be selfish. Like, for example, Tiffany Aching. In the Discworld books, her selfishness is her strength. She uses it to claim and to fight back those who would take from her. Lyra in His Dark Materials, who uses lying and stuff to like help her, and all of that thing. So like these women who are allowed to be selfish, and that's initially my feeling towards Hester was, oh yeah, it's another one of these characters who I really love. And then as the book goes on, you go on such a journey of she does awful things. I think I got sad for some of her adult arc when I felt like she was just doing awful things, and we weren't being allowed to have that Hester who was slightly more complicated, who did awful things, but who also had that little inner shyness and all of this stuff. I don't know where I'm going with this. I just found my reading of Hester more conflicted this time. I wanted her to be allowed to struggle with things without immediately being painted as the worst person in the world, but then at the same time she did also betray a city, so like, who am I to say anything? How do you feel about Hester? I literally just finished the final book yesterday, so maybe I should have waited a bit longer and pondered on these thoughts a bit more, but I also sort of just wanted to capture like my immediate reread feelings. I've got a lot of them. I still really love this world. I still really love the concept, municipal Darwinism, this conflict between the two sides when you have good people on both sides and you're like, how do you reconcile this and find an ending? And yeah, so I still really love these books. I'm still really going to recommend them to people. I maybe have slightly more complicated feelings to them than I did before I did my reread, but I really like Philip Reeve in general. And I'm really looking forward to reading the Fever Crumb books all over again. I would love to hear your thoughts. How has your reading experience, has it changed since when you first read them? How are your feelings on all these characters I have mentioned? Which book is your favourite? Which book is the weakest in your opinion? All of this and more, please do tell me in the comments below. As for now, I hope you're having a lovely day, and I will see you next time.